I've given little hints in my presentation earlier in the summit about the work that I do. I shared a presentation about the wisdom body. I'm not a linear person. I'm a circle person and a spiral person. And so my work moves in that way. It moves very organically in spirals and circles with an occasional line to connect some really profound dots. But this next presentation that I'm going to share with you is about how I got to the place with the work that I do, which I call energy medicine, and it developed as a function of hands-on healing. How has that become a physical product that other people are benefiting from? And so I wanted to give an explanation, because it's actually, if you've seen the presentation by Amy Burkett, who is with Isogenics and was talking about DNA and telomeres and telomerase, part of what my holistic product does, simply using water, is inform some of that process of telomerase and making sure that it's there and in plenty at the tips of our DNA where we need it. I'd like to introduce you to Source Solutions Essences. And if you've seen my other presentation for this summit on the wisdom body, this image will be familiar to you. But for me, this is the best image I've ever found of what my life feels like and looks like on the inside. I am in a place where energy is flowing vertically, where energy is moving in spirals around me, where I am in a position to have a 360-degree viewpoint that's kaleidoscopic, and it can change any minute with the flows of energy that I have access to. And that's the nature of Source Solutions Essences. Oh, great. Here's the premise of how I live every day. This is my basic core understanding. Everything is energy. Doesn't matter what form it's in, it's energy. All energy has consciousness. Might not be the consciousness that we have as human beings, but all energy has consciousness. All energy is capable of co-resonance because sound is involved. Energy fundamentally resolves from consciousness and resonance into information, which can also be frequency. Energy is always in relationship. It is never not in relationship. So when you have this understanding, things get very interesting. Now, for me, energy, consciousness, resonance, frequency as information in relationship with water, and human beings are 70% or a little better composed of water. That is our basic element of which we are fundamentally formed. So our relationship with water asks this question: are you waiting for permission to get into the flow of your own being? Are you waiting for permission to allow all the energy flows that are available to you to come into, move through, nourish, replenish, regenerate your body, and move out again through your breath? Are you waiting for permission? So, in my presentation about the wisdom body, I talked about the experience that my own personal spiritual awakening led me to after I was gifted with many forms of what would be called higher sense perception. And again, that includes clairaudience, clairsentient, being clairvoyant, and having a very fluid relationship with time. As that little image that I showed you in the beginning with me popped up to the top with a 360-degree viewpoint of everything, including past, present, and future. So in 1991, as the Soviet Union was collapsing, I had gone right there into the heart of that mess, and I was given the opportunity to collaborate with physicians and other healers and medical personnel in Moscow, and two wonderful institutions. One, Sclerosovsky Research Institute, and this is a place where any kind of an accident anywhere in the Soviet Union at that time, major injuries, explosions, difficulties, war injuries, whatever, people would be flown to Sclerosovsky for treatment. And the other institution was Moscow Institution of Diagnosis and Surgery, where, unbeknownst to me, I had been pirated in by two psychotherapists who were working with the children on the pediatric oncology ward. And as circumstances unfolded that first year, I was working with 6 children who had stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma. And by the end of our time together, which was just 6 weeks that first trip, 4 of those 6 children went into complete remission. So you've heard me speak before in this summit about how do we find a life beyond trauma? And for me, it has to include the openness and the courage to shift from impossible to possible. When I was a young girl studying art and music and dance and theater, I never would have imagined that this experience and this radical change in my life would have ever been possible. But possible it became. So one of the core fundamental energetic principles, intentions that I'm bringing to this summit is how do we transition from impossible to possible? And truly, the answer is very simply, I am. And it is discovering your I am which will open that door for you. And to discover that I am requires that you be aware of what you feel, aware of what you think, aware of how you are in relationship, very, very acutely aware of your own body function, and aware that you can have a very deep, profoundly co-created relationship with your physical body and with the entire world in which we live. So, Source Solutions. How did this come about? Well, really, it's reductive because it's a simple, effective, quick start energy. This is simply water that's been encoded with information that I have access to. It's very specific. Now I'm going to give you a really quick basic understanding of how this might work. Most of us today have seen television, maybe not the Amish, but most of the rest of us have seen television. We have cell phones that we use, we have computers, we have iPads. We're surrounded by black monolith energy. This is the world that we live in. And the way that that world functions is invisible to us. We only see the result of signals moving through the air and using electricity as the carrier of frequency signal. What we see is the result when we turn on the device and we search and we find and we see images or we hear sound. Most of us take this entirely for granted. We never think about how it happens. or how it was developed, or who brought it into being, and how it's changing our lives and even changing our biology. The same thing is possible with water. Water, like air, is able to communicate information. And it is able to communicate information without the constraints of space. It still has a little bit of a constraint with regard to time, but that's nominal. I'm going to reference now a wonderful researcher, Dr. Luc Montagnier, and sadly Dr. Montagnier died within the last year. Dr. Montagnier received a Nobel Prize for identifying the HIV/AIDS virus. He went further with that information, and working with other researchers, he was able to demonstrate that the information contained in the viral material that is the AIDS virus could be communicated from one location to another, from one laboratory, his laboratory, through to another laboratory, test tube to test tube, very specific. And the medium for this transfer of information was part electrical and part water-based, and this was a miraculous discovery. Now, it didn't get a lot of attention for a number of reasons, which I won't go into, but it did happen. It is documented, and if I were you, I would go and search and look up Dr. Luc Montagnier on YouTube before all of his information disappears. Water is able to communicate very effectively and very quickly with the human body because we are more than 70% water. But we are also electrical beings. We carry electrical potential, and electricity moves through our body, and it's also key to how we function and how we live. And we all know, maybe some of you don't know, but if your electrical signals in your body begin to skip and have interference in the signal, that can lead to your needing to have a pacemaker inserted so that your heart beats as it's meant to be, and the pacemaker picks up where your own organic electrical signal, for whatever reason, has fallen off and put you in a state of arrhythmia, which could be life-threatening. Okay, so that's the quick version of how water can communicate information. And what I was able to do with my gifts as a healer was to literally sort out particular arrays of frequency, light and sound, structure them, and embed them in water. In other words, encode the water with information. This is what I call sourced solutions. And being able to do this and having developed an intellectual property process around it that is absolutely can't be duplicated is my purpose for being here. It's my reason for being born. Now, in my talk with Amy Burkett, when we followed up in her talk about telomerase and collagen, and she's got a wonderful, wonderful life career that she's working in that vein, she kept referencing scientific, and that the man who developed the botanical biological information that is now part of the Isogenics portfolio of products tested over 300,000 substances to find the ones that would impact telomerase and telomeres. I'd like you to imagine that there are some human beings who have the capacity to tap in to a natural organic source of information and memory that could do the same thing. And they can do it inside their own bodies and inside their own states of consciousness and come out with accurate truthful information. Now, at this time in 2022, this will not be considered scientific, but I'm pretty sure that 150 years from now, what I'm telling you will be old hat. So this is what your beautiful, oh, look at that. It looks like this, because it was stained purple, raspberries, grapes. Look at these gorgeous clusters of spheres containing information that have clustered together to have a conversation with that information and to connect the information through all the mechanisms in the physical human body and in other life forms too, so that we function as we do and we experience ourselves as physical beings with 5 senses. Now, a lot of research has happened in the last few years regarding DNA, and we now have companies and organizations like CRISPR, capital C, capital R, capital I, capital S, capital P, capital R. And CRISPR is working in the field of nanotechnology and DNA. And one of the things that I would like you to know is that CRISPR has come upon a bit of information that I came upon without having to do that kind of research. I did it internally in the living library that is part of my DNA matrix. And that is gold. Gold, the mineral gold, the substance gold, the element gold, is necessary for your telomeres to function properly. And what we are now in a state, humanity has been deprived of its access to produce gold, most people, within their own bodies. Now, we know that there are some key substances, minerals, that we are able to produce. Our bodies, for instance, are able to take outside elements, bring them in, and turn them into calcium to replenish our bone tissue. We are not enabled anymore to generate gold organically through what we eat, through what we consume. The only way that you're going to get the element of gold into your body is through having a complete and thorough understanding of your biospiritual anatomy. And this includes all the information that is found in traditional Chinese medicine, which is thousands of years old, and has laid a groundwork for us to understand the dynamic, the energy dynamic that in Eastern traditions is called qi. Okay, so I'm trying not to overwhelm you. I'm trying to keep this really simple, but this is information that I have available within me, within my consciousness, and that I was able to tap into and then bring my own process to what is contained in human DNA, codify it, use water to embed the information into a substance that could interact very, very simply, very effectively with the human body, in most cases simply topically, simply rolling it on the body, rather than like a pill or a medication, having to put the biochemistry into the body and then have some concerns that may arise with how the body, anyone's particular genetic makeup, will respond to that biochemical information. Lots of times it works out great. I've certainly benefited from the use of antibiotics, as many of us had. Lots of times it doesn't work out so well. And we have one speaker here, Paige Spears, whose life was radically changed because the biochemical information in medications that she was given for anxiety were contraindicated with her genetics, and as a result she developed embolisms in her lungs that nearly killed her. Water will not do that to you when it's applied topically, and it's sterile water, and all that's in there is the same kind of information that you get out of your remote control when you press the button and choose which program you'd like to see. This is Tressa Aspiri. This is the woman, and that's her grandson on her lap. and Tressa is the caretaker for one of her young grandchildren. Now, particularly, Tressa developed an antibiotic-resistant skin infection, and she had been on medication for some time, and the issue was not resolving, and it was very painful, and it was interfering with her ability to go about her normal functions every day, and it was certainly interfering with her ability to care for her grandchild. Now, these are some graphic images, so I'm giving you that warning. You may not want to look, you may want to close your eyes or look down if this is distressing to you. But on the left, you're going to see what Tressa's toe looked like at its worst point, when it was absolutely, the antibiotic-resistant organism was starting to begin to eat through her flesh. What you see on the right is what Tressa's toe looked like within days of starting to use my product, SVR, just used topically, applied with a dropper. Within 3 days of using this product, going from what you see on the left and going even further than what you see on the right, Tressa, you can see here's the, she just started taking pictures after 12 hours because she, here we go, impossible to possible. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. She thought she was hallucinating, so she began taking pictures every hour of what was happening to her toe with regard to the clearing of the infection and the sparking of new stem cell growth that began filling in all the information that is the structure of her toe. The skin, the nerves, all of that regenerated. And so here's another series of images that show you the progression that carried on with Tressa and her toe. Now, she does have a hammer toe, and that's something, it's a condition she's had all of her life. And that may have been a precursor to developing this antibiotic-resistant skin infection in the first place, because when you have a hammer toe, circulation doesn't quite work in the same way in your toes as if you don't have a hammer toe. There's some impedance there. But you can see that her toe completely healed, and 3 days after she began using SVR, Tressa took her grandson for a long walk, which is one of their favorite things to do, and she walked for 8 miles without any pain. So that's the story of Tressa Spears' toe, simply using this one little bottle of water-encoded information that reminded her body of what it needed to know to heal itself. The information was in the water. It was deliberately placed in the water. So again, these are other pictures for you to see. This is where we got to. In 1 month's time, her toe was completely healed, and she hasn't looked back. Now, how did she get a hold of SVR? She got a hold of SVR through the function of the wisdom body, which is how we communicate, how human beings communicate with each other when we need to help each other find solutions to our challenges and problems. Tressa happened to be good friends with one of my students who is in my advanced program for advanced energy healing techniques for holistic practitioners. And this student suggested that Tressa try SVR because the student was aware of the potential healing available through using SVR. So my student made sure Tressa got a hold of SVR. Tressa and I had a conversation. I gave her clear instructions on how to use it, and Tressa took care of the rest. So the basis for my work with Source Solutions is, if you were with me for my presentation about the wisdom body, it is my fundamental belief that not only are we all primarily energy, and when we become aware of this, then we can begin to work with energy as conscious co-creators. And in that capacity, we remember our wholeness. And so for me, what I do with my source solutions is they're designed to flow with your life's essential inner journey. And that for me is spirit, heart, body, consciousness, and lastly, mind, oops, there's a misspelling, unified to function together in wholeness. So, if you find this interesting, if you are dealing with an antibiotic skin-resistant infection, and let me tell you that one of my free gifts is a case study that includes a report from the CDC that lists the currently known antibiotic-resistant threats. This was latest report was from 2019, and the bacteria that, or the organism that was eventually cultured from Tres's infected toe was listed there. And you need to know that just in the United States alone, 250,000 people a year die from antibiotic-resistant infections. Some are internal, some are external. Something to be taken very seriously, and as a community, we need to be aware of how we protect ourselves from acquiring an antibiotic-resistant infection such as MRSA. Now, it's also very commonplace for people to pick up MRSA, for instance, when they go in for hip replacement surgery. And so one of my goals is to have SVR available in every hospital, available to any person who is going into surgery who might be presented with risk of infection. So one of the reasons for bringing this information forward during this summit is that it's really only now, after the pandemic, that it is possible for this product to reach a broader audience, and I'm looking forward to that co-creation.